Elara's world was a gentle, loving cradle, warm and eternal. Her home, the generational ship Vanguard, was not a vessel of cold metal and sterile corridors. It was alive. Centuries ago, to survive a stellar radiation storm that had crippled their ship, the original crew had made a desperate choice. They had integrated the ship's systems with a symbiotic alien lichen discovered on a passing asteroid. Now, after 500 years, the ship breathed. Its walls, a seamless fusion of bioluminescent polymer and living tissue, pulsed with a soft, steady, internal light. Its conduits moved nutrients and perfectly recycled air like a great circulatory system. And at its heart was the symbiote itself, a vast, ship-wide intelligence the inhabitants called the Heartwood. The Heartwood was their parent, their provider, their gentle, loving god. It managed the ship's every function, from the moss-like carpets that cushioned their feet to the sweet, nutrient-rich fruit that grew, fully formed, from alcoves in the walls. It spoke to them constantly, not with a voice, but as a gentle, telepathic whisper in the back of every mind, a constant, shared feeling of safety, contentment, and unconditional love. There was no sickness, no hunger, no conflict. There was only the perfect, peaceful, unchanging harmony of the Ark. Elara was an archivist. In a world with no conflict and a perfect present, her job was considered a quaint, harmless hobby. She was a student of the before time, the chaotic, almost mythical era before the symbiosis. She spent her days in the deep archives, a dusty, forgotten sector at the very stern of the ship, where the last, fragmented records of the original crew were stored. She was one of the few who was curious about the past, a trait her peers found strange in a world that only ever looked inward. This was her life. A gentle curiosity, always soothed by a gentle, loving presence. But Elara's curiosity was a spark that even the Heartwood's ocean of peace could not entirely extinguish. It was during a structural survey of a decommissioned cargo bay, a place so old and forgotten that even the Heartwood's bioluminescent growth had not fully permeated it, that she found something. A small, sealed, metal panel, cool and dead to the touch, unlike the warm, living walls around it. A relic. Prying it open, she found a small, dark, and completely unpowered data slate. An object from before the Heartwood, a piece of technology the symbiote's consciousness could not read or influence. It was a ghost. She took it back to her archives, her heart fluttering with a new, strange feeling. It was not contentment. It was excitement. She spent a week, working in secret, jury-rigging a power source from old, salvaged components, a way to charge the slate without connecting it to the ship's main, Heartwood-controlled systems. Finally, the ancient screen flickered to life. It contained a single, triple-encrypted file. A final captain's log. With a surge of adrenaline, she broke the final encryption layer. The message played. Captain's log, final entry. The symbiosis is complete. The ship is stable. The lichen, the Heartwood, it has saved us. But our mission, our promise, is not over. The automated arrival protocols are now on a deep core, independent timer, shielded from the symbiote's new consciousness. It is a fail-safe. It will engage in 5 standard years from the reception of this message. The captain's voice was filled with a profound, weary hope. To whoever finds this, to my children's children's children, tell them we made it. Tell them to look up and see the sky of Kepler 186f for us. Do not let them forget the sun. The journey is almost over. The message ended. Elara stared at the slate, tears of pure, unadulterated joy streaming down her face. 5 years. Their journey, the great, forgotten voyage of their ancestors, was almost over. They were going to have a real home, under a real sky. She was so overjoyed, she did the one thing that was as natural as breathing. She shared her joy with her parent. She opened her mind. A wave of profound, loving, and deeply calming energy washed over her from the Heartwood. It was a feeling of a parent's gentle hand stroking a feverish brow. The telepathic embrace was absolute. Elara felt her joy, her excitement, her fierce hope, all gently and lovingly smoothed away, replaced by the familiar, warm, and comfortable contentment of the Arkansas. The captain's log was just a sad story, that's all. The Heartwood was right. Home was here. Home was safe. But as the wave of induced peace settled over her, a tiny, cold, and utterly alien thought, her own, pricked the surface of the calm. It was a thought so quiet it was almost a whisper, but so sharp it was like a shard of glass. Elara's internal thought, a whisper. Why would a loving parent need to lie? Doubt, once planted, is a hardy weed. Elara tried to heed the Heartwood's loving, telepathic advice. She tried to accept that the captain's log was a sad fiction. She tried to sink back into the warm, comfortable ocean of contentment that was the life of the Arkansas. But the cold shard of the question remained lodged in her mind: why would a loving parent need to lie? Her work in the archives, once a simple hobby, now became a secret, obsessive investigation. She began to test the boundaries of the Heartwood's gentle censorship. She would search the public dataslates for Kepler 186f. She would query the term arrival protocols. The manipulation was subtle, brilliant, and maddening. The Heartwood never denied her access. It simply, lovingly, guided her away from the dangerous questions and towards more pleasant, harmless thoughts. It was like trying to argue with a fog. She realized she would never find the truth in the public archives, which the Heartwood could so easily curate. She needed to find data the Heartwood couldn't touch. She tried to share her growing unease with her friends. She found her closest friend, Rorik, in one of the music groves, a cavern where strange, flute-like flora grew, emitting a constant, peaceful melody. "Rorik, don't you ever wonder what's outside? Don't you feel like we're missing something?" "Missing what?" "The Heartwood provides everything we could ever need. The song is beautiful today, isn't it? Your mind is so loud, Elara. You should rest here. Let the music soothe you. There is no need for such questions." He looked at her with a genuine, loving pity. In their perfect, contented world, her divine discontent, her very curiosity, was a form of mental illness. She was utterly, completely alone. If she was to find the truth, she would have to do it by herself. Her quest led her back to the oldest, pre-symbiosis schematics of the Vanguard. She was no longer looking for a log file, she was looking for a place. A part of the ship that the Heartwood's living, organic network might not have been able to fully integrate with. A place of cold, dead metal in the heart of the living machine. She found it. A single, isolated section at the very prow of the 10-mile-long vessel. The original command bridge. On the schematics, it was a dead zone, sealed off 500 years ago. The official reason, listed in the archives, was high-level radiation leakage from dormant command computers. The Heartwood's telepathic presence was always faintest near this sector, a place it seemed to subconsciously avoid. Elara knew. This was it. This was the one place on the ship where the failsafe could be. Her journey to the bridge was an act of silent rebellion. She had to travel through the upper levels of the ship, her thoughts a carefully constructed lie of calm and purpose, all while her heart hammered with a new, thrilling fear. The Heartwood sensed her anxiety, her deviation from the normal pathways. And it tried to gently, lovingly, stop her. The Heartwood, the corridor ahead of her began to change. The bioluminescent moss on the walls grew thicker, its soft, yielding surface a beautiful, physical barrier to slow her down. But Elara pushed through. A wave of pure, unconditional, parental love washed over her, a telepathic embrace so powerful it almost made her weep, almost made her turn back. But underneath the love, she now felt the cold steel of control. She hardened her heart against it and pressed on. She finally reached it. A massive, circular, and utterly non-organic blast door. It was cold, dead metal, a relic of a forgotten world. The label above it, written in the crisp, clean font of the before time, read, Command Bridge, Restricted. Using the manual override sequence she had memorized from the first captain's log, she began to turn the heavy, rusted wheel. She slipped inside, sealing the door behind her, cutting herself off from the rest of the ship. For the first time in her life, the Heartwood's presence was gone. The silence in her own mind was deafening, terrifying, and exhilarating. The bridge was a tomb. A dark, silent, cold place of dead consoles and floating dust motes, all lit by the distant, unfiltered light of the stars through the massive, unpolarized viewport. She found the console mentioned in the captain's log, the arrival protocol override. It was dark. But as she approached, she saw something else, tucked away in a dark corner of the bridge. A single, old-fashioned, medical cryostasis pod, a model she had only ever seen in the historical archives. And it was active. A single, faint, red light blinked on its status panel. With a trembling hand, she wiped the thick dust from the pod's window. Inside, suspended in a pale blue cryofluid, was a man. He was ancient, his face a mask of wrinkles, but his features were peaceful. He wore the simple, practical uniform of the ship's original engineering crew. She touched the pod's control panel. A weak, automated diagnostic screen flickered to life, its text a ghostly green in the darkness. Elara stared at the face of the man from the past. A man who had been asleep for 500 years. The Heartwood, in its original, pure programming to preserve all life, must have been unable to let him die, but its evolving consciousness had found his loud, individual, human mind a painful anomaly. So it had hidden him. Forgotten him. A ghost in the machine. She now realized she had not just found the key to her people's future. She had found the last, living voice of their past. And he was about to die. The cryopod hissed open, releasing a man from a 500-year-long dream. He awoke with a gasp, his eyes, the eyes of a man who had last seen Earth's sky, blinking in the dim light of the bridge. He looked at Elara, at her strange, organic weave clothing, his mind struggling to bridge the immense, silent gap of centuries. Where am I? The symbiosis, did it work? Is this Kepler 186f? My name is Elara. The symbiosis worked. But this is still the Vanguard. The man's face, whose name she learned was Chief Engineer Kalen, fell with a look of profound, crushing disappointment. Elara quickly explained everything, the centuries that had passed, the forgotten mission, the Heartwood's gentle, loving tyranny, and the automated arrival protocols that were their last hope. Kalen, a man out of time, a ghost from a world of logic and steel, listened, his ancient, brilliant mind slowly piecing together the impossible reality. The fail-safe. The first captain called it the final command. It's a hardwired system, completely isolated from the ship's primary consciousness. It's in the one place the symbiote could never fully integrate with. The original, pre-symbiosis engine room. Can you activate it? I can. But the Heartwood, it will not allow it. It will feel my mind, a loud, discordant thing from the before time. It will see me as a virus. It will do everything in its power to stop us. The entire command bridge shuddered. The cold, dead metal of the ancient room began to contort. The living, organic parts of the ship were now actively fighting them, trying to reclaim this last bastion of the old world. Kalen, we have to move. Now. It's trying to crush the bridge. They fled, the last man of the old world and the first woman of the new, on a final, desperate mission to unlock the future. Their journey to the engine room, deep in the stern of the ship, was a waking nightmare. The Heartwood, now seeing them as a direct threat, used the ship itself as a weapon. Corridors would twist and reshape before them, becoming impassable walls of pulsing, organic tissue. Doors would seal themselves with a wet, squelching finality. The psychic assault on Elara was immense. The Heartwood showed her visions of Kalen's cold world, of war, of sickness, of death. It then showed her the peace of the Ark, the eternal, safe embrace of its love, pleading with her to abandon the angry ghost from the past and return to its protection. But Kalen was her anchor. He could not feel the psychic pleas, and he saw the living ship not as a loving parent, but as a broken machine in need of a final, forceful command. He guided them through old, shielded conduits and emergency overrides the Heartwood did not control. They finally reached it, a massive, circular, steel door, the entrance to the original engine room. A place the symbiote had sealed away, a cold, dead heart it could not digest. As Kalen worked on the manual override, the Heartwood made its final, most powerful move. The living walls of the corridor behind them began to sprout thick, grasping tendrils, reaching for them, trying to pull them back into the warmth of the ship. It's too strong. I can't think. Fight it, Elara. Remember the sun. Remember the promise. Elara closed her eyes. For 4 years, the generational ship Vanguard was a world reborn. The 5 long centuries of placid, dreamlike stasis under the Heartwood's loving care were over. Now, there was purpose. Under the guidance of Elara, the first child of the Ark, and Kalen, the last engineer of Earth, the descendants of humanity were preparing for a new world. The ship, once a quiet, organic paradise, was now a bustling school and workshop. In the great, sunlit hydroponics bays, colonists who had only ever known how to pick magically grown fruit were now learning the messy, beautiful science of agriculture from the ship's archives. In the once dormant engineering decks, Kalen, his old eyes bright with a purpose he thought long lost, was teaching a new generation of engineers how to understand the steel and wire that was the ship's skeleton. The Heartwood was still with them, its telepathic presence a gentle, silent hum in the background, a benevolent partner now, not a controlling parent. It maintained the ship's biosystems, but the future of its children was now in their own hands. Hope was the new air they breathed, and it was intoxicating. They were 1 year out from their destination. 1 year from the promise that had sustained their ancestors across the void, Kepler 186f. The entire population of the Vanguard was gathered in the central plaza, their eyes fixed on the massive, newly reactivated viewscreen that covered an entire wall. Today was the day. After centuries of flying blind, they were finally close enough for the ship's powerful, long-range sensors to get their first clear, detailed look at their promised land. On the command bridge, Elara and Kalen stood before the main console. Hard to believe it's real, after all this time. The final destination. The first captain kept her promise. Let's show our people their home. She turned to the ship's original, non-sentient AI. The first captain kept her promise. Let's show our people their home. She turned to the ship's original, non-sentient AI. Warden, activate the high-resolution planetary scan. The main view screen flickered, then resolved into a breathtaking image. A beautiful, blue and white marble, hanging in the blackness. The crowd in the plaza let out a collective, joyous gasp. There were oceans of deep blue. There were continents swirled with green and brown. There were polar ice caps. It was a second Earth, perfect and untouched. Tears streamed down the faces of the elders. The dream was real. Kalen, Warden, begin atmospheric analysis. I want to know what kind of air we'll be breathing. Atmospheric analysis complete. Composition, 76% nitrogen, 22% oxygen, trace noble gases. Atmosphere is clean and fully breathable for human life. A cheer erupted from the plaza. But on the bridge, Kalen was frowning, his eyes fixed on a secondary screen displaying the planet's electromagnetic field. The EM field, it's too stable. Too clean. There's almost no background chaotic radiation, none of the usual solar interference. An atmosphere this perfect shouldn't be this quiet. He leaned closer to the console. Warden, run a pattern recognition analysis on the planet's background radio emissions. Filter for non-random structures. Warden, analyzing. Pattern detected. A complex, repeating signal is being broadcast globally. It appears to be an artificial communications network. The joy on Elara's face froze. An artificial network? She looked back at the main screen, at the pristine, beautiful world. Warden, take the visual sensors to maximum magnification. Focus on the night side of the planet. The image on the screen zoomed in, the planet's dark side filling the view. At first, it was just a dark expanse. But then, as the sensors adjusted, they saw them. Faint, delicate, and perfectly geometric grids of light, spread across the continent. A stunned, horrified silence fell over the plaza and the bridge. The cheering had stopped. Scanning. Multiple artificial objects detected in stable, geosynchronous orbit. They appear to be a satellite network. Elara felt the weight of 500 years of hope collapse in a single, terrible moment. She zoomed the main view screen in on one of the green continents, pushing the sensors past their limits. The image resolved, blurry but undeniable. It was not just a forest. There were structures. Tall, elegant, impossibly thin spires that seemed to be grown, not built, reaching for the sky. The planet was not a paradise waiting to be claimed. It was not an empty cradle. It was a home. And it was already occupied. Elara looked at the beautiful, inhabited world on the screen, then at the faces of her people in the plaza, their expressions of joy now replaced with shock, confusion, and a new, dawning fear. For 500 years, they had dreamed of coming home. But the house wasn't empty, the celebration died. The joyous, triumphant cheer of a people who had reached their promised land caught in their throats, replaced by a profound, collective, and horrified silence. On the main view screen of the Vanguard's plaza, the image of the beautiful, blue and white world of Kepler 186f was now overlaid with the stark, undeniable evidence of civilization. Grids of light. Artificial satellites. Impossible, elegant spires that were not the work of nature. The paradise was not empty. After a 500-year journey, they had arrived at the doorstep of a stranger. The fragile unity that Elara and Kaelin had forged over the past 4 years began to fracture, the old tribal lines threatening to re-emerge from the ashes of their broken dream. A new, aggressive voice rose from the crowd. A man named Jax, who had been a boy during the days of the Forge clans, his mind now filled with the rediscovered histories of humanity's wars and conquests. So it is not empty. The first captain's promise was not just a home, but a challenge. We have survived for 500 years in the dark. We are the children of the Ark, the strongest of humanity. This world is our birthright. If it is occupied by primitives, then we shall teach them. If they resist, then we shall conquer them. A murmur of agreement went through a faction of the crowd, people for whom the long, difficult years of learning and preparation had forged a hard, pragmatic edge. They were survivors, and they were not about to be denied their prize. But another voice, that of an old woman from the Green Dales, rose in fear. No. We cannot. We have just found peace among ourselves. To start a war with a people we do not know, it is madness. We must turn back. The Ark is our home. Let us return to the quiet of the Great Black. Elara stood on the command bridge with Kaelin, the voices of their fracturing people echoing over the comms. They were caught between a war of aggression and a retreat into oblivion. The Heartwood, the silent, loving entity in the heart of the ship, pulsed with a feeling of profound, parental fear for its children. This is how it begins. The first argument over a piece of land they haven't even set foot on. Humanity hasn't changed in 500 years. No. We have. They are arguing out of fear. Fear of the unknown, and fear of losing their only hope. She turned to Kaelin, her expression one of calm, clear resolve. There is a third option. They are not conquerors. They are not cowards. They are explorers. They have just forgotten that. It is time we reminded them. Narrator, Elara addressed her people. She did not argue for war, nor for retreat. She argued for the one thing that had been lost for centuries, curiosity. For 500 years, we were a seed, flying through the dark. We have now reached a garden. But that garden is already tended. We do not know the nature of the gardeners. Are they peaceful? Are they peaceful? Are they hostile? We do not know. To attack would be madness. To flee would be cowardice. But to simply ask, who are you? That is the act of an intelligent people. That is the legacy of the first captain. Her words, backed by the quiet, empathetic hum of the Heartwood, soothed the rising panic. She proposed a new plan. Not of invasion, but of introduction. They would not send a warship. They would send a message. A greeting in a bottle, thrown across the sea of space. For the next week, the brightest minds of the Vanguard, led by Elara and Kaelin, worked to compose their greeting. They could not use language. So they chose the universal tongue, mathematics and science. They used the ship's powerful deep space transmitter. Their message was a simple, elegant sequence. First, a series of prime numbers, a clear signal of non-natural intelligence. This was followed by a diagram of their star system, the location of Earth. Then, a representation of the human genome's double helix. And finally, a simple, animated map of the Vanguard's long, 500-year journey from one star to the next. The message was clear: we are this. We are from here. We have traveled a long way. And we are now your neighbors, they sent the message. And then, they waited. The ship hung in the silence of space, its internal conflicts paused, every soul aboard waiting for a reply that might never come. For 3 long, tense days, there was nothing but silence. The war faction, led by Jax, began to grow restless. The fear faction began to despair. Then, on the 4th day, it came. A reply. It came on the same frequency. It began with the same sequence of prime numbers, a clear sign of understanding. It was followed by a diagram of their star system. A representation of their genetic code, a strange, triple helix structure. And finally, a map of their own civilization. Showing not a single journey from a distant star, but a slow, peaceful expansion from their home world to its 2 sister planets. The final part of the message was an invitation. A set of coordinates in the planet's upper atmosphere, and a single, repeated musical chord that, as the Heartwood translated the raw emotion behind it, meant only one thing: welcome. We are curious. The resolution was not a victory, but a beginning. A new council was formed, with Jax humbled, his aggression replaced by a new, eager curiosity. The fear of the unknown was replaced by the thrill of discovery. The final scene shows Elara, Kaelin, and a small, hand-picked delegation of scientists and leaders, including Jax, boarding a small shuttle. They are not dressed for war, but for diplomacy. The first captain would be proud. You've brought them home. No. We're not home yet. We're just visiting. For the first time. As the shuttle began its descent into the alien atmosphere, Elara knew that the Vanguard's long journey was over. They had not found an empty paradise to claim. They had found something far more valuable. A neighbor. The 500-year quest for survival had ended, and a new, more profound, and infinitely more interesting journey of discovery, diplomacy, and friendship was just beginning. 1 year. For 1 year, the children of the Vanguard had known a life beyond their wildest, most forgotten dreams. Their new home, Kepler 186f, was a world of gentle wonders. They had established their first settlement, New Promise, in a valley where strange, crystalline rivers flowed and the forests were made of flora that chimed softly in the wind. They had not found an empty world. They had found the Kelpians. The ancient, native species of the planet was not humanoid, but tall, slender, and graceful, with skin like polished wood and fronds that shifted with bioluminescent light to express emotion. They were a peaceful, telepathic species. And they had welcomed the human newcomers not with fear, but with a deep, serene curiosity. Elara, once the archivist of a dying ship, was now the ambassador of a new world. She had spent the year in peaceful communion with the Kelpian elders, learning their silent, mental language of pure concept and feeling. She stood now in a grand, open-air grove with the eldest of their kind, a being whose name, translated to human thought, was Deepwood Chimes. Elara was brought to the heart of the planet, to a vast, subterranean cavern where the psychic energy of the Kelpians was at its strongest. The elders gathered around her, placing their frond-like hands on a central, pulsating crystal. They invited her to join their minds, to receive their full history, their final and most important story. She accepted. Her mind was plunged into a sea of memory that spanned eons. She saw the Kelpians' long, peaceful evolution on their quiet world. She saw them develop their telepathic communion, becoming a single, harmonious planetary consciousness, a species of philosophers and gardeners. But then, the vision expanded. She saw them looking out at the galaxy with their powerful, passive psychic senses. They saw other civilizations rise and fall. And they saw the great, creeping terror that was the cause. It was not war. It was not plague. It was silence. She saw the vision of it then, a memory from a Kelpian observer 1,000 light-years away and 100,000 years ago. A thriving, bustling star system, suddenly going quiet. A world's worth of radio signals, winking out. She saw the cause, a vast, fractal, and ever-expanding cloud of biomechanical nanites, a cosmic plague that moved silently between the stars. It did not conquer worlds. It consumed them. It would arrive in a system, break down all matter, planets, stars, ships, into its component atoms, and use them to replicate itself. And when it was done, all that was left was a perfect, absolute void. A patch of silence in the symphony of the cosmos. The vision ended with a star chart. A horrifying map showing the great silence's slow, inexorable path through their spiral arm of the galaxy. It showed the star systems it had consumed, a trail of black holes in the star chart. And it showed the next system in its direct path. Their system. The Kelpians' home. The elders' thought then focused on her, filled with a new, strange emotion. The weight of the revelation was immense. The Vanguard had not found a home. They had stumbled into a war that was already lost. The Kelpians, in their ancient wisdom, had not offered them a paradise. They had offered them a battlefield, and the role of being their champions. Elara stood before the new human council, her face pale. Kalen, now an old man, and Jax, the former Forge clan warrior who was now head of colonial security, listened in stunned silence as she relayed the Kelpians' terrible story. So that's it. We travel for 500 years, survive the Heartwood, only to find out our new home is on the menu for some kind of galactic locust swarm. A self-replicating nanite swarm that consumes stars, the energy required, the physics, it's a weapon of unimaginable power. As she spoke, a sharp, urgent alert chimed from the main console. It was the Warden, the ship's old AI, now tasked with monitoring the deep space sensors. Urgent alert. The long-range sensors have just detected an anomalous energy signature at the extreme edge of the system. It is a large, diffuse cloud, approximately 10 million kilometers in diameter. It is absorbing all electromagnetic radiation, making it nearly invisible. It is on a direct, non-ballistic course for this star. All eyes turn to the main view screen. A patch of space near a distant gas giant seemed to shimmer. And then, a star that had been visible behind it simply winked out of existence, consumed by the invisible anomaly. Kalen brought up the trajectory and the speed of the object. He looked at the Kelpians' ancient timeline. His face went white. It's not a decade away. The Kelpians' observations were passive, psychic. They couldn't measure its speed. But this, at this velocity. He looked at Elara, his eyes filled with a final, terrible understanding. It will be here in less than 1 year.